So we are here to talk about confidentiality, best practices, anything general you want to learn from our esteemed panelists, Jenny Kinnaman from Sheltering Wings and Jill Stowers from IU Health. If you're trying to attend a different session, just know that it is, other than confidentiality, please take the time to go and check on that. We have staff that can help you redirect yourself to the session you would like to be at. But if you want to be a cool person and learn about confidentiality, then please continue to stay. I am your friendly neighborhood grants analyst, Nilufar. I've been at IHCDA since 2023. I focus on both the ESG program, Emergency Solutions Grants, and the HOPWA program, Housing Opportunities for Persons with HIV/AIDS. And with that, I'm going to let you guys know that we will start with just a brief presentation, but then we'll kick it over to panelists, and we'll be passing the microphones back and forth, just so you all know that they do in fact have voices that can project. All right, first things first, this session will be recorded. Just saying, we will record the session. It will be posted on the BOS website. When will it be posted on the BOS website? We're hoping by the end of the week. Just so you know, when we talk about confidentiality, we're talking about the importance of protecting the information of the clients that you serve. Regardless of your funding stream with us, you're actually required by regulation to protect all personal identifying information. Generally, that tends to be people's names. It tends to be their location, their homelessness status, really any information that links directly to the client. Now, there are extra considerations that you may have to take if you are either a DV provider and you're oftentimes using VAWA, or if you operate a HOPWA program like Jill Stowers at IU Health, as well as Jenny Kinnaman at Sheltering Wings. If you are having to take additional considerations, then you're in the right place to hear more about that. So, general rules about confidentiality. Regardless, agencies should have a confidentiality policy because COC, ESG, HOPWA, DV or non-DV, you have to have something. General tips. Be mindful of your surroundings. Think about when you're having a conversation, where you're having that conversation, what you're talking about, who's in the room, should that person be in the room, is there a chance that someone that shouldn't be hearing something is hearing something? I don't know, but try your best to know. Lock away your client files. If you have digital files, look into encryption. If you got physical files, get a key. And if you don't have a key, figure something out. Just be mindful of when you do share your client information and how you're sharing that information. If you have written permission from a client, that's awesome. Make sure that they're signed. So when we talk about the specific protections and specific considerations we have to take with VAWA, we have to understand that the protected information is much more high stakes in certain situations because your motivations for protecting that information involve protecting someone's life. Unfortunately, there are too many situations in which a survivor's safety is jeopardized. We want to make sure that everyone that has access to those VAWA-centric protections is able to access them fully, and that all of our service providers within the balance of states is able to make sure that all of the survivors and their family members are protected. Now, health status and information. So we phrase this generally because while this may be very Act for anyone that is operating a housing opportunities for persons with HIV/AIDS program. Any health information is also information that should be protected. So think about this, like the substance use and mental health diagnoses of a client is also protected health information that you would want to be mindful of protecting when you are made aware of said information. As we talked about in the general slides, be careful of when that's discussed, how that's discussed, who's in the room and who can and can't be in that room when it's being discussed. Be mindful of how you're communicating with the external health-related entities that are out there. In our last slide, we talked about specific stakes or motivations that you have to consider with VAWA, someone's physical safety being in danger. Here, there may be stigma for certain health conditions. So if there's misconceptions about, let's say, someone living with HIV or AIDS, that stigma could involve them facing discrimination. It may also involve not having access to the same services that someone without that diagnosis would have. So, okay. Now, I'm going to keep the survey up, but I am not going to stop the session. We are going to figure out how to get this microphone to move. And if we cannot figure that out, we cannot figure that out. Okay.
I mean, I'm really loud. I can't be.
Are you guys good with projecting?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna have our panelists project their voices. So the first question, and I want to be mindful. Jill, we'll start with you. How does your organization approach creating policies and practices for confidentiality?
So we are, can the back row hear me? Am I good? All right, yay back row people. That's my preferred seating location. So, I run the Positive Link program for IU Health. We are the HOPO provider. We have other housing programs as well, but we are part of IU Health. And so we have a very large system. Like, there is a lot of oversight. There are councils that review my policies. There's a lot. Like, we are a whole package, which has its pros and it has its cons. But I think that as we're creating policies, I always look specifically at each of my programs. So whether it's, for our HOPWA program, whether it's one of our Ryan White programs, even if it's an STI program, whatever it is, and what is the potential harm that one of our clients could face, and make sure that our policy is covering that. So we try to be very specific into because IU Health is going to say they write their own confidentiality policies that we follow. And so I really look at getting into the weeds of where is the biggest risk for our clients, but even more than writing the policies is just consistent culture of how we're teaching them, how we're interacting with staff. If I see frontline staff in the hall, I'm like, hey, in a room. Yeah. Or I'll be like, I'm going to close your door because I can hear you and I'm in the hallway, and so could anybody else be. And so just having that kind of day-to-day, which normalizes it and makes people realize that these aren't policies that are just in a policy shelf somewhere that they could ask me how to access because who knows how to get to all of them, but are kind of a real day-to-day integration into what that team member is doing.
Okay, Jenny, what about you?
Yeah, so I think very similarly to that, we are part of, so Sheltering Wings, we're domestic violence service provider. We have both a shelter as well as housing programs and community advocacy or mobile advocacy services. So we really serve the gamut of individuals experiencing domestic violence. And so VAWA is where we're going to go first for those, policies, what's allowable, not allowable, but then how does that practically play out for us? And so how do we store records? How do we do releases of information? There are extremely limited sets of circumstances under VAWA in which we can involuntarily release somebody's information, and even some of those have caveats attached to them. So a participant dies, there are still protections around their personal information and in that caveat. And so looking at what are those practical things that we can do as staff. So sound machines outside offices, because our case management offices are just in the middle of the bullpen. That's not ideal for needing to both take a crisis call and be meeting with a client. In a shelter situation, you know, a client sees you walking through the kitchen, they don't care what your position is. They're going to ask you the question, you know, they're going to start talking about things. I always tell my team, clients, they can say whatever they want to say, wherever they want to say it. It's our job to protect them in their confidentiality. And so we're going to take them around the corner. Let's come into a private office. Let's have that conversation where it's not your business in front of everybody else. And sometimes I think we also have to do a good gut check for ourselves there. That's good and bad information, right? You want to celebrate your success that your client had. The kitchen isn't the place to do it. And that can be, I think, you know, we don't think that there's an ill intent in that, but we want to make sure that we're protecting that information no matter what. How we store documents, how computers are accessed, all of those pieces. There are places that clients cannot get. To that point of locked, our files are double locked, and then some of them are triple locked. So you have to be able to get into the office, then you have to be able to get into the file room, and then you have to be able to get into the file cabinet. And so only the people who need to have access should have access. We don't have, everybody in our agency does not have DV client track accessibility. It's very limited on our admin team who can actually get in there. And so just thinking about who really needs to have that information. Does your policy make sense for why they would need that information? And then we have a really strong policy on our releases of information and how we write those. We have them for emergency situations. We have them for landlord situations. We have them for case conferencing. Poor clients, I mean, our release of information section is sometimes 20 releases of information, depending on how long a person has been with us, and who we need to talk to about what.
That's interesting that you mentioned that you're very decisive about which staff gets the access to the DB client track. Do you have a method for how you choose those staff members? Is it based on the team that they're on, the duties that they have? Please explain what that looks like for your agency.
Yeah. So we have our shelter staff obviously have access, our stability building team, which is our case managers, and our employment specialist, our housing specialist. I do have a prevention team member who does have access because he also helps fill shifts. So he needs to take crisis calls and that sort of thing. But I have another prevention team member. She doesn't fill shifts, and so she doesn't have access to the system because there's not a reason for her to do that. Our children's department, I have the program manager has access because she needs to put notes in when she's doing intakes and talking to the school, but the child care folks don't need to have access because that's not how we do that record keeping. And then our grants manager has access for pulling reports, and our CEO. And so nobody else on that admin team has access into the system because their role doesn't align to needing to have that service. So even on our program team, though, it's not just universal. It is role dependent on, would you need to put a case note in, or do you need to be able to read case notes to do your job efficiently?
Jill, do you have something similar?
Yeah, and I was actually a couple of things on the release of information, like the specific, like what information are you releasing? Because like I have a lot of information on all of my clients, a lot, more than what like probably anybody has about me personally, maybe even more than my husband has. Not all of that is released if I've signed a release of information. So we do try to be very specific to like, what are you releasing to who specifically? Because it may be that, you know, like our community mental health center, well, not anybody there, like a particular program there from a particular program that we run. So that specificity is really important, I think, in release of information. And then in terms of access, so we actually converted from paper charts to electronic charts, like in the last couple of years. But we still double lock all of our offices because my staff are human. And while they're not supposed to have anything on their desk, they might have written on a Post-it note before they walked out because they're human. So we maintain all of those same like double lock that we would if we had paper charts. And then of course we have the computer access as well. But like we do not all have, like everybody on my team certainly does not have HMIS access. So just my frontline, I don't have HMIS access because honestly, like my program manager is going to pull a report. Like if I need a report, I have a quality person and a program manager, and one of them is going to pull it. I don't need to know that information. If I am meeting with a client, that's fine. They can fill me in on what's going on. I'm probably just doing crisis intervention because nobody else was there. I don't need to have that. Even if I am in charge of, like, I run the show, I don't need that. It doesn't pertain to my job. So I have 5 folks that are on our housing team, 6 with the manager. They have access. None of my other staff do. We have about 50-ish staff members. None of the rest of them have access to that, because if there's some information that they need, that would get released through program to program, even internally. So that access point piece is just, it's an easy way to control flow of information. Like, it's low-hanging fruit in terms of making sure that, like, this base number of people aren't going to have access to it, and so they can't have a confidentiality violation.
Yeah.
But yeah, even with I do think, even if you were electronic charting, that double lock, like, you have to get into our building, you have to get into the person's office, you have to get into a file cabinet, because humans are human, and we all screw up sometimes.
Thank you both for your answers on that. Another question I had was about the release of information form. I know different agencies, they have a variety of considerations that they take and how they do their release of information forms for their clients. One question I have, when a client signs a release of information, how long is that release of information good for? Is it a instance where they sign the release stipulating the specific topics that they're consenting to release, as you mentioned? Is it time-based to assert something temporary, or do you find that it's longer and ongoing? How does your agency handle that? Jenny, you can start.
I would say our releases are situational. So if we are doing a release of information for a landlord for housing, we're going to have that be the length of the lease term generally. If we're doing a child care enrollment, we may only have that be for 2 weeks to work back and forth with the child care and get that kiddo enrolled. And then we don't need to be part of that conversation anymore. And so it's really dependent on what the service is that we're tying to that release of information. We don't wholesale just write them all for a year or for 6 months or anything like that. So it is very dependent. We do put an actual physical end date on them. We don't say 2 weeks after exit or something like that. Like, we actually physically end date them. So you do have to do good file management if you are engaged in services with somebody for longer, and make sure that you're going back. Or if we have a DCS release and the case closed, the release is no longer good, something new happens, DCS would call or want to come by and see them. Again, if we don't have an active release, then we have to be mindful that we need to go check the file every time to be sure that we have that active release in place so that we can have a conversation. Or even for a DV provider, we can't even acknowledge we're providing services. So if DCS shows up at our front door on a call that we did not make, I can't confirm or deny that person is even receiving services in the building. Talk about frustrating people, right? Doesn't always go over super well. But it can't be forever, and it has to have that time limit, and we are going to put that time limit around the thing that we're trying to accomplish on behalf of the client.
We are similar and different. So we do a 6-month release. So we used to have an annual release, and it's just longer than what oftentimes you need. Our folks tend to, when somebody enrolls in services with my program, they're typically with my program. We have people that have been for 20 years, until they pass away or move away, most often. So we do a 6-month release, and they have the option at the time that they sign it, or if you've signed a release to me and then we get in a fight,
Right.
You can immediately right now, no more. And that's how it is. But it is a 6-month release, and then they can rescind that earlier if they wish. And so, but the file management piece, that is no joke.
Yeah.
Because it would be much easier to just be we want to talk to your landlord as long as you're in the program. But unfortunately, that is not how that works. And so we actually kind of do a review of like the full client, like a biopsychosocial basically, and paperwork every 3 months, just to make sure that we're getting eyes on all of those, to make sure does something need updated in order to keep the flow of services, because we also don't want to have to go hunt down a client, right? Like they don't stay with us. So we got to go find them to sign a release. So we do that continual review of the files so that they're not like hung up on something that now we could intervene, but we can't, and we got to somehow get them to us, and they might be an hour away. So yeah, maintaining being on top of those release of informations is a big part of people's jobs.
Okay, speaking of all of that, another thing that has really come up, especially with the current time period that we're in, is the fact that lots of things happen, and sometimes there are things that we just didn't anticipate or haven't really thought about until it's happened. Jill, I thought I'd start with you. What kinds of things have come up that you might not have initially thought about that were confidentiality related, but that all of a sudden you now got to think about?
So I now think about law enforcement and ICE presenting on site looking for someone, which is not something I have historically thought about or wanted to think about necessarily. So we actually did, so while that has not happened, thankfully, because I think not only would my team be stressed out, but I promise I'd be stressed out as well. But we did go through like exactly what does any of our frontline team members, management, admin, whoever you are, if ICE or law enforcement walks in the door, what is your role? What do you need to do? How are you protecting yourself, your client, and the greater organization? So we actually went through, and we, again, I have the luxury at some points of being part of a larger institution. So we actually have like, this is who you call. You call me, you call my cell phone and you keep calling because I will pick up if you call a second time. My kids have trained me to do that. If you call twice in a row, I know I need to answer. So, calling leadership, they call legal, they're gonna call IU Health, Department of Public Safety, but like, how do you stall? We can't provide that information, right? Like that is an IU Health policy, regardless of who, like if somebody walks in looking for me, like they can't give them my electronic medical record. So going through, and then we actually printed out like, this is who you call, and this like, call this person, then this person, then this person with the phone numbers. And this is the person that you would talk to. Because when you're in a moment and you're potentially scared, who remembers that? Like I don't, like I just start freaking out about things. Actually, I'm kind of the opposite. I get like super calm and then I freak out right after the fact. But so we actually printed them out and laminated them so that every team member would have a resource to go to, like it's in a desk drawer and it won't matter if you spill something on it because it's laminated. So that they can look at that and be like, I don't know what to do and this is horrifying, but here's who I call. Because frontline team members shouldn't be dealing with that. And so, having that reminder of what resources are available to you in a situation you didn't expect that you would be in, I think is helpful.
Jenny, do you have a similar experience or different?
So yes, we do have a policy for if ICE would show up. We unfortunately, I don't want to say frequently because that oversells it, but sometimes do have law enforcement show up to our facility either because a missing persons report has been filed, an abuser trying to find their victim, or maybe there is a warrant for our client for some reason. And so if it's a warrant situation, it has to be a certain kind of warrant. It can't just be an arrest warrant. There also needs to be a search warrant as part of that because we are a business. We're not that person's home when we're at the shelter location. If it's a missing persons report, we don't confirm or deny. If we know that person, you're welcome to leave a business card and we can have them call you back. Again, we're best friends sometimes with law enforcement, which I will say this, in talking to other DV providers around the state, we really do have a very good relationship with our local law enforcement, both the sheriff's department and then the local police department that would respond for us. it doesn't mean we still don't frustrate them, because that is a frustrating experience. The other thing that we do when people come in for shelter services is we have them sign a emergency release. So if something would happen while they were in shelter, especially if they have kids, is there a family member that you want us to call, because I don't want to have to make a DCS call because we don't know where else to send your kiddos. So we have them sign that on the very first day when they come in, and we have kind of a whole scenario of reasons why we might need to contact and what, you know, we should share with them. We also have them sign a release that very first day when they come in for if we did have to call for medical personnel for them, for EMS, because as a DV provider, even if it happens in your building, even if you know them, you basically, if you don't have that ability, you're supposed to essentially treat that person like you found them on a street when EMS would arrive. And that's not super helpful if you know that they have a medical condition, right? So if you know that you have somebody with a seizure disorder, that can be helpful information for EMS to know. Or you know that this person is 36 weeks pregnant and is high risk, that's helpful information for EMS to know. We're not supposed to share that if we don't have that. So we also have a release for emergency medical personnel for when people come in. Again, the client gets to direct what they want us to share and how much they want us to share, but that has been helpful. And again, and especially in an emergency, not having the EMS crew who is going to be back, right? They're going to come to our facility again. So if we can have that good relationship with them, we're trying to get ahead of those things. But that is just not something that you necessarily, like, you know, if somebody's having emergency in front of you, like, you treat the emergency, but you don't. Like, I mean, you do, but you just have to be careful with how you treat the emergency. So like the list of releases just, it grows every time we think of something new. It's like, oh shoot, we should have that
Or
thing
the
too.
thing comes up that you've
Yes.
never had to deal with before and you hadn't given a thought of, and now you're like, you know, in our case, we have like 800, 900 clients, and I'm like, we've got to have a plan for those 900, because that just happened once and it could happen again.
Yeah.
One thing that really caught my attention that you both talked about was that tension between, you know, having to protect the information of your clients while also trying to maintain the relations that both of your agencies have with law enforcement. I remember when we had first spoken, we talked about suspected or confirmed breaches of confidentiality that either happen either advertently or inadvertently. But I wanted to really touch on, get your perspective specifically on times where maybe you have had to disclose something based either on something that you were required to disclose according to VAWA stipulations or not. Jenny, I wonder if you could elaborate on that.
Sure. So I would say a DCS report is probably the most common situation that we would run into. And so because everybody's a mandated reporter in Indiana, and so VAWA does allow for that protection within making those reports. We absolutely tell our clients when we've made that call, though. We don't keep that hidden from them because almost always if we make that DCS call, I can't think of a single time in the time I've been there that DCS has not at least investigated on that call. And so they're going to come. We want our clients to know that that's happening and that we'll be here for support for you during that process. But whatever has happened has meant that, you know, we have to make that call. Even within making that call, though, we're going to be extremely protective of the information we share. And so if we had to make that call because we witnessed a parent hit their child across the face, as an example, but we also maybe had some concerns that they weren't following our child supervision policy. Doesn't mean that they weren't watching their kids, doesn't mean their kid was in a dangerous situation. They just weren't following our policy. Those are different things. And we work really closely with staff on training on the difference between those things. That we're not going to disclose that in the call to CPS. That's an internal policy issue. That's not anything about the situation we're calling about. And so we're going to, even if we have to make that call, we're still going to do that with the least amount of information possible to get the report across, essentially. And then we will support the family if DCS opens a case, if they would like us to sit in on case conferences, things like that. We are not a DCS service provider. I also want to put that out there. So we don't give DCSR reports or anything like that in ongoing services, but we're there to support the parent at that point through that process. But that's probably the most frequent time. We do occasionally have to make calls due to mental health situation for a client as well, the harm to themselves or others. And again, we're going to share only what we have to for the purpose of the call, and not all the rest of the history for that person.
And then Jill, I know there's a lot more nuance with HOPWA information, especially with HIPAA considerations that you all have to take. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I was actually thinking, because like we've had some CPS stuff, adult protective services tends to be more our game, but probably our most common situation that comes up is well checks and having to call local law enforcement for a well check. And we do have, we actually provide services in all of the IU Health regions, so wherever you live, we're probably there, but for good or for ill. My program's for good always. So we don't have a policy on it per se of what to do, but our standard practice is that any of our frontline team members, if they're calling for a well check, they have staffed that with someone in leadership first, if there are any other options. We also will tend to, if you are calling for a well check, you do that when you're already at their house. So we do home visits. We're not, I mean, people can come see us in the office, but the vast majority of our work happens out in the field somewhere. And if we're concerned, it is typically a mental health issue. We also have the luxury from a HIV standpoint. Like, I work for IU Health. Literally anything could be wrong with you or nothing could be wrong with you. All I have is an IU Health badge. So there's really no need to ever bring that up or discuss why we have any concern. But we do try to have staff there, not to go in, but to be present and to be available should de-escalation be something that needs to happen. Most often, it's not something that needs to happen. But we also are not, our clients deal with a lot of things and they have a lot of trauma and they have faced a lot of stigma. And if you have someone come to do a well check that is not there expressly to de-escalate a situation, should that door open, I want my team there because they're going to be able to intervene. So we kind of have some practices that we've learned over the years, some that didn't used to be as necessary that are now. And so you have to kind of look at what is the current situation that we face? What are the current cultural environment that we're living in? What is this particular person's race, ethnicity, gender identity, what is the whole package? And how do we make sure that if we're bringing somebody in where there is potential, even potential that we're going to have to disclose anything at all, that we've kind of thought that out ahead of time and modified to accommodate for what the needs of that particular client are.
I do have one more question that I wanted to ask, and it's more admin-y related as opposed to the direct service part, but
always exciting.
For real. It's one thing to have a confidentiality policy and to abide by that policy. What steps do you take at your agencies to, one, document that you're abiding by your own policy, and two, that you're also abiding by the requirements as defined in either VAWA or the HOPWA confidentiality requirements? Jenny, start.
So I would say our policy document would be essentially where we lay that out. We review those annually to make sure that they're still meeting the policy requirements, and then update any practice things that might need to be updated within that or process things. And then we actually, within the client record, when we get releases of information signed, we make notes in there that we got that release of information signed that day. We upload it into their file so that we have it. If a client would revoke that release of information, we're going to make that note in there. We're going to upload then the revoked release of information so that that's in there. And then any kind of collateral contact that we have, if we have to talk to a landlord, if we have to talk to another service provider, we're documenting those contacts as well, so that then we can also see in line that we did those things. my preferred method, unless we absolutely have to have a conversation with a provider or somebody without the client, my preferred method would be that those conversations are happening with the client, so that, again, that nothing's secret from the client. And then if there is anything that the client wishes to disclose that's outside the scope of our ROI, that's not us, that's the client then who maybe would have shared that information. We do also, unless another organization's release is written really, really specifically, we don't accept like reciprocal ROIs, because generally what we found is that those reciprocally written, I can't say that, ROIs, they're not specific enough generally. Sometimes, especially like the DCS one, it's just a checklist of all the organizations, and I'm like, that is not actually meeting our standard. And so we won't accept that. So we will also make sure that other organizations, that we will give the client one of our releases of information, that they can work with that other organization, that they can sign, that sort of thing, and get back to us, so that we can be sure that we're really abiding by like that strict standard that we need to. And then, yeah, we just a lot of documentation in the client file.
Jill, what about you?
Yeah, so I think kind of two different ends, like organizationally and client-driven wise. You know, for my team, we do have our individual policies and, of course, like our big IU health policies. Those we also do like annual trainings, both like as a whole staff, like all of IU health gets confidentiality training annually. But then my team does, so my whole team meets quarterly. One of those, I think it's going to be October this year. We have like our HIPAA people come and do like a refresher. We do it in team meetings, and like I was saying, we just catch things, because we're all like, everybody in this room is making confidentiality errors like very regularly. And so just like catching those on the regular, because it creates a culture of noticing, because if you don't notice it, you don't notice it. So we kind of call those out. We also monitor our client charts, so we do internal chart audits monthly. Each of the managers of each of my teams does like a percentage of the charts, that they review those every month, to make sure that, you know, release of information is current, leases are current. Do we have all of the things that we are supposed to have before we are doing anything? We monitor the storage compliance. So like, if somebody doesn't lock their office on the regular, then somebody like me is going to be like, why is your office not locked? And then they'll be like, well, I don't want her to talk to me anymore, so I will lock my office from now on. The electronic charting, I will say, has helped a lot, because filing's hard. Like, filing is hard to keep up on when you have a bunch of clients that are constantly in crisis, so that has reduced our risk somewhat. But then organizationally, like, we do have, typically from a healthcare standpoint, not like from a leasing standpoint, but we'll do business associate agreements with people that we work with on the regular. So like, my program works with Aspire Indiana Health in our northern regions every day, every single day. So on an organizational standpoint, we also have signed a business associate agreement to cover continuity of care. Our clients we're still talking to them about the fact that, you know, we share office space. So you would think people would know, but we still have the conversation. They still sign a release, but that still sometimes happens, that you don't have a release yet, or we're looking for somebody who's not in care. So we do that on the organizational level, just to protect staff and to be able to explain that to clients, that like, yes, we're here and we may be talking to each other. You've signed a release. They tend to be really specific, but we share an office. And so we have that like greater organizational level for continuity of care, in addition to the more programmatic level.
Okay, those are all of my questions. So I want to bring it over to our lovely audience attending this wonderful session about confidentiality. Do you have a question for our esteemed panelists? Yes.
I do, and I think you kind of touched base on this. This is something we have recently discussed at our organization, about whether or not we have an ROI for staff. So we have different programs, but we don't have a large amount of staff on each program. So there's one person that does this program, there's one person that does this program, type of thing. So kind of siloed, but not necessarily. We all share resources, etc. Would you say that having an ROI or having a spot on your ROI stating, you know, we will be possibly discussing your situation with other staff members, would you recommend that, either one of you ladies?
We didn't when we were that small, because they were typically like, we all had to cover an on-call day, because there weren't 5 people covering it for housing, because there weren't 5 housing staff. So I think when we were smaller, we didn't. We do like an internal referral now. So like my housing staff doesn't have access to medical record that a Ryan White staff would have access to. And typically our route of entry is through Ryan White. It's like, so they're either somebody with HIV or they're somebody with Hep C, and then they would go to a housing person if that is an area. So we just do an internal referral. The housing people don't know that person even exists if they haven't like touched on housing, because we're bigger now. So we do have more of a like, this is a person that I want you to meet with. They exist. Here's some issues. We will staff the case. Whereas when we were smaller, we didn't necessarily do that because we all knew all of our clients already, and they knew all of us.
Let's see, for DV, there is some language within VAWA, and I don't know it particularly off the top of my head, but there is language that if you have DV services within a broader organization, there is some, it probably would be best practice to get an ROI in those circumstances, because there is some language in VAWA about that. Since we're only a DV agency, I don't know that language off the top of my head. But there is something within VAWA, so like, yeah, that to add that extra level of protection.
And I would say whatever you do, like whatever you decide on and you write a policy on, that is what happens.
Yeah.
You know, because a lot of times it does fall back to what your agency has decided is going to be their practice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
As far as like CE in your region, do you guys have like a release of information for like case conferencing or something of that nature?
I think I don't attend the CE meetings, but we do accept referrals from them. And my housing manager is on. I think as part of the intake, like the assessment, it says like the CE committee members will have access to your screening. But until once they get referred to us, we actually do a release of information from whatever organization did that initial screening to get them on the list, also does a release to us so that we can get background on it.
And for DV, we, any other DV providers in the room? We're in the middle of kind of the transition on how DV things are happening right now. So clients can either sign the release for full release of information for HMIS for their chat, or we now are using an anonymous method as well. But when we are sitting down doing the chat, we are signing releases for IHCDA, and then we're signing individual releases for all of the case conference partners for our region. And then if we are transferring the case, if it's going somewhere else, then we may go back and then update a release to be more specific about that ongoing participation.
We still have time for questions, y'all. Don't be shy.
What do you use instead of the check boxes? You said that wasn't like up to your standard, so how would you use it?
If we need, so as an example, that DCS or I've seen the DCS ROI, and it's got like community, I mean, it just has, I don't know, there's 15 organizations that are just checked, and it's essentially a full disclosure release. We literally will sit down and do an individualized ROI for every organization we might need to have conversations with, and every one of those is then going to be specific to what does that client want us to share. We do not have any full disclosure releases written. Part of VAWA level of confidentiality is that we will have a conversation about how this could help you, how this could hurt you, why you might want to limit what we're sharing with other people. It's super time consuming if you need to have a lot of them. We do have some standard templates that we can kind of start from, and then we could take things off if we need to or add to it. But we do kind of have, basic like name, that you're a Sheltering Wings participant, And then if it's housing related, there's going to be some housing stuff. If it's mental health related, we're going to have, for a referral process, things like that. So we have some templates that at least my staff can use as a jumping off point. They're not as, we don't have to think of it every single time.
Same as that.
Yeah.
Yes.
This one's for my own Jill.
Oh, hey, my team's here.
So question for like program participants in the same household that are adults.
Yes, always awkward. When we have program participants that are in the same household, or sometimes even worse, in the same apartment complex, it is difficult, and they see, this is Jacob, everyone. Jacob's a housing case manager with us. So and I'm sure other people do, like, it's really hard to find landlords at FMR that aren't slumlords and are willing to take a voucher. So when we find one, we often rent more than one of their units, and we try to be very good friends from there out. That does lead to, Jacob's also like 8 feet tall. Stand up for everybody. He's so tall. He's noticeable. He's noticeable in the parking lot. So, if Jim, he's doing a home visit with Jim, and then Dan looks out the window, is like, oh, why is Jacob in the parking lot? And so we kind of, when we're training people in, is that like, you could be doing anything. You don't have to be on the clock. I actually encourage people not to wear their name badges or any of their IU Health gear. Like if you're doing a home visit, it doesn't need to say IU Health. Like you can just be a person. So you could be on your lunch break. You could be whatever. Typically they find out. What happens between them talking is not our concern. It's what happens between my team talking to staff or talking to someone else. So we do, if we have, we do have clients that have a release with another client because they're in a shared housing unit. And so that's entirely up to the client on what they want to disclose, but we're also not going to be in the middle of whatever's happening for them. But it does come up, and we generally play dumb. It's the same thing, I early in my career was just trying to check out at Kroger, probably getting a Diet Coke, and one of my clients yells from back in the meat section all the way down the aisle, I gotta go get my labs tomorrow. And I was like, oh my God, nobody at Kroger wants to know this. But again, I was like, well, let me just shoot down that aisle and try to make that a little quieter. Yeah. But at the end of the day, that's not a confidentiality breach. He can scream anything he wants about his health status. I cannot. Yeah. Awkward, yes. Yeah. A breach of confidentiality, no.
Okay, we do have time for one more question before I wrap things up. So if there is yes.
You may not know the answer, but is there any exclusions within the Caney-Vento with schools? The law that, because we obviously work with the guidance counselors and the liaisons a lot, we always have our ROI, but typically if we don't, when we can't share anything, if they just call and say, I have this family I'm concerned about, they freely share the information most of the time. But is there any exemption because they're concerned about a minor, they're reporting that.
So the question is whether you could disclose anything?
We can say we're working with the family, or we assisted them, we'll contact them, that kind of thing. We typically always get the ROI, like I said, but it is difficult when you get a mad rush of them to explain to the school that we can't just talk to them about everything that we provided, which I get it that they want to know so that they understand what then they need to do, or if they then need to make a report. So,
yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
The number of times I say to people, you can tell me anything, I'm not going to tell you anything, but anything you think I need to know, if it's something I should follow up on, I will. But you can tell me anything.
Yeah, very similar. And then we did host the local school corporation. We had 15 teachers, support people, everything come out, take a tour of our building, so we could explain the space and how it works and how family, what that is, and then have a confidentiality conversation as well in that. And we absolutely try to get that release, but we have families who move out and they don't tell us that they're moving out, and then the school's like, do you know where the kid is? I'm so sorry, I can't confirm or deny that I'm providing services to my family.
All right, so